It's time to fasten your seatbelt and rev up that engine. It's time to go on Pit Row. On Pit Row is your weekly look inside the world of NASCAR. Now live, here's the pit crew, Steve Ronkowitz and Charlie Turner.
Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go on Pit Row, boys.
What do you say, boys? What'd you think of that race down in Kansas? Welcome, everybody, first of all, to our live weekly NASCAR Hangout on Pit Row. I'm Charlie Turner, joined by Dan Beaver down in Texas. Say hi, Dan.
Hello, Dan.
And Steve-O in lovely City of Trees, Sylvania, Ohio.
Hello, y'all.
We may be joined later by Beth Ann Heisler, but if she has the same kind of trouble that we were having getting the show started, she won't bother. I'm sorry we're a little bit late. It seems to be the fault of my aged laptop computer, but that's neither here nor there. We had I thought was a very interesting race at Kansas Speedway this past weekend. Lots of twists and turns to the NASCAR Chase saga 2014. Who wants to start with this thing? Steve, what'd you think?
My favorite comment always, is if the chase or if the final chase were to start now, sort of thing.
Yeah, you love that, don't you?
I love that. So let's see here. If I got this right, that would mean that JJ, Junior, Keselowski, and Casey Kane would all be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and Casey Kane looked like a potential winner with about 50 laps to go.
Actually, I was looking at and Beth and my pick didn't look too bad for a lot of that race either.
No, I thought you guys were in good shape.
Which was McMurray, and then all of a sudden he just kind of went into the shit too. So that's the way it goes. So it was darn interesting, and everybody's got to be happy that they get to save 22 cents a gallon with their Shell Saver cards again.
You do get that, and what I put up to kind of spur comments this week to see if I could get some interesting comments for our potential Shell gift card winner for this week, the one with the free one we give away, is I put up what brought the loudest cheer where you were watching the race during the race. And I knew this was going to be Jimmy Johnson hitting the wall. I mean, it just was, that was going to be what it was going to be. But I thought somebody would come with something else. No, it's all Jimmy. Everybody's glad he's, potentially out of this thing. They're going to feel real bad when he wins this week at Charlotte, but whatever.
That's the question I got for Dan, too, is do you think that it heightens the excitement of this thing, or it kind of cheapens it, the fact that somebody can finish, 42nd, and then the next week, if they win, they get to move along?
I don't think it cheapens it. I'm not sure that it heightens the excitement either, though, but I think it's it keeps someone from getting locked out for something that essentially was not their problem. Johnson was not running well, but he wouldn't have crashed on his own. He got turned by Biffle, and it's kind of hard to see a championship end because of that. So now at least he has a chance to win and get back in it. The same with Amarillo's blown engine. At least he had a chance to win and get back in it. So I like it.
Here's my question about the contender round for you guys. Would this round be better if the Talladega race was the first of the three than being the last? Because then you would know a little bit more about what the effect of the potential big wreck is, and somebody would have time to maybe do something to try to win a race, or is it better this way to have the great unknown at the end, kind of like it is for the rest of us in real life?
I guess if you have to have Talladega in there, and I think most people know that pretty much, I think all of our feelings is that Talladega doesn't necessarily belong in the chase anywhere. But if you have to have it in there, I would say you would be better off having it as the first race of whatever particular round you want to have it in. Like you say, because at least that point, if you wreck out of that thing in 43rd spot, you got a chance. This way, these guys are really shuffling at this point. If you're wrecked out and you finish 40th this week, you've got next week to get a chance to win, and then there's Talladega.
And I would agree, and if it's got to be in the chase, I would rather see it be the first race of the Challenger round, so that you still could have two more good races and elevate yourself up into 12th. Of course, nobody really expected I didn't expect what we saw at Kansas with the number of tire failures. And we don't know why the tires failed. Goodyear, of course, is blaming the teams because Goodyear never has made a bad tire. But if the teams were doing something, they were doing something radical with camber because they were afraid about Talladega. So if Talladega had been the first race, they might not have done the same kind of foolish things with their tires that they may have done here. Of course, that's all speculation. Could be that Goodyear actually did bring a bad tire, but I doubt that.
Well,
Sarcasm.
the results are we have Joey Logano winning the first race and advancing to the next round already. He was, I think, one of the favorites by everybody who's. Hold on a second. That cough button's not as convenient with this setup as it is on the radio. I think it's no surprise that Joey Logano's moving on. What surprised me, I guess, after you eliminate the four drivers who were out of contention, the four contenders that were out of the contention, is some of the guys who finished high. I mean, Kyle Larson, again, another strong second place finish. Austin Dill, all three of the RCR cars finishing top 10. Two of the three Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas finishing in the top 10. Kenseth just outside. The only Roush Fenway car in the top 10. What's missing here? Hendrick Motorsports is missing from that whole thing.
Yeah, but when you take them out of the equation, you take them and Kevin Harvick out of the equation, you're going to get an interesting looking top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it should, if things had been normal and you had Harvick, Gordon, Johnson, Brad Keselowski in the top 10, Dale Earnhardt hovering around the 10th place mark, then you wouldn't have Austin Dillon, Paul Menard, and Brian Vickers in there. You'd still be talking about them having solid runs in the top 15, but we wouldn't be talking about them having top 10s, and probably not even Denny Hamlin or Ryan Newman finishing 6th and 7th. They probably would have gotten displaced by those other drivers. So, yeah, I think you can credit Goodyear for the interesting top 10.
Yeah, so we go to Charlotte. So, and the tire's probably not going to be a whole lot different, I wouldn't think, at Charlotte than it was at Kansas. So, where's that conversation lead? Are the teams going to? You got some teams now that really have to roll the dice, I think, at Charlotte. Any of those four that finished towards the bottom, all four of those could be, I think, considered at least contenders for the win at Charlotte. How's it change anything for you guys going forward? I know we're going to talk more about Charlotte at the end of the show when Dan covers the fantasy stuff. But what do you think? What's your seat of the pants feel on this, Steve? Does anybody have an advantage going to Charlotte?
I don't know if anybody has an advantage. But, like you say, Goodyear's never made a tire that has ever failed in their life, and it's always on the cruise. But the point being is that while I don't think Goodyear, is 100% to blame, I generally find that most crews are the ones who pretty much precipitate this problem by trying to run as little air pressure as they can, and you can't blame them. But I think they bring a lot of this stuff on themselves. Now, that being said, who is the one that tends to be the most out there with this sort of stuff? And generally it's the 48 car, because they are the ones that continually to try and push the envelope, and I don't begrudge them that. But, you got to wonder if they're going to play it safer, which they've never done in the chase.
And the problems that we had last week, it seems that Keselowski's problem was substantially different than the problem that Earnhardt had. If Earnhardt's tire delaminated, that's probably not something that the team did. If Keselowski had the camber set strangely, then that could have been the problem. And Johnson just got wrecked. Casey Kane just drove into the wall. So those are the things that are happening because of the sense of urgency that this three-race playoff format has. So that's not going to be any different. Except it's difficult to imagine Johnson and Keselowski having back. They usually don't do that. This will galvanize them. I think they'll run near the front. But who else will crash? If Hamlin, Newman, Busch, any of those guys crash, then we've got a really tight battle back at the elimination bubble.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to go forward. I got a couple more things I want to get to before we get to the fantasy stuff, though, today, and we definitely want to do our little commercial for Shell and the big Wednesday win this week for Joey Logano. But before we go there, one of the things that came out this past week is that Kyle Busch is going to be changing crew chiefs, longtime crew chief whose name just totally escaped my brain just now, for next year. How big of the story do you think that is going forward?
I think it's a fairly big story. It's not a surprising story. Dave Rogers, I believe, is his name.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't pull it up.
Yeah, and it's been a story that's been percolating there for a while, and it's not unusual. I believe what the speculation is that they'll bring his nationwide crew chief up to be his crew chief in Cup. These guys.
Yeah, the announcement was like a Joe Gibbs Racing, Kyle Busch Racing team up kind of thing.
Right. And the thing is that when you look at what Kyle does, he races half the time for himself. He races half the time for Joe Gibbs. So, the question is, it's like a baseball manager. How long are they going to last? And they've got most of these guys have a life expectancy of about 2.5 to 3 years. I think it'd probably be about the norm. And anything longer than that is somewhat unusual. Anything shorter than that, and you don't even bat an eyelash. So, it's. I think more the question is how is Rogers going to get along with
Carl Edwards?
Carl Edwards next year. So, and how long will that last, and will there be chemistry? That's what these guys are constantly rolling the dice for.
Well, I think potentially this could be, if we've talked a lot about Kyle Busch's success in the truck and the Nationwide Series over the last several years. Steve always kind of discounts it, but maybe by Kyle bringing that organization forward up to the big series, maybe he can find what's been missing and keeping him from winning races. What do you think the potential is there, Dan? And we're joined by Beth Ann. Hey, Beth Ann, what's going on?
Hey.
What do you think, Dan?
I don't think you're going to challenge for the championships unless you get that marriage made in heaven, like Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson or Paul Wolf and Brad Keselowski. So you got to find that right chemistry, and you got to keep those people together for a period of time in order for it to work out. So, and it seems like you either get one extreme or the other. You either get drivers evolving through, or you get the ones that stick around forever. And if you can get Kyle Busch comfortable in the car, if you can get him comfortable in his communications with the crew chief, then there are very few people who can drive a car better than him when he is in his comfort zone. But when he gets out of his comfort zone, he crashes and he kind of lashes out, it seems, at those around him. And I think that's a driver issue, not a crew chief issue.
Yeah, I think I was more surprised that they didn't have something more. Maybe this has been planned for a long time, but something more in place for Carl Edwards. That was the surprising thing to me. That we're going to pull Kyle's crew chief, and he's going to be Carl Edwards' crew chief. It's almost like, I'm sure it wasn't, but it almost seemed like here's your guy, Kyle or Carl. Anybody else get that sense out of this thing?
Well, I think, like I said, it's been going on. The determination probably had been going on for quite some time. And when they signed Carl Edwards, it was probably one of those things that had already been determined at that point, just because of the fact that Kyle had made it probably clear that he didn't want to continue going forward the way he was. So I would say that was probably kind of a done deal. Now, whether or not the question you have to ask is that what Carl Edwards okay? Did he write off that? Did he say, okay, yeah, I'm really good to go with this? We don't know that.
Because it doesn't matter. That's who he's got, sounds like. Yeah. So I think that team's going to be that whole Joe Gibbs Racing organization is going to be really interesting to watch next year because of all this. And Steve, I think we should probably do our shell read, and then I've got another comment I threw up there I'd like to talk about, and Beth's here just in time to get into it.
Well, just remember that you can submit that Shell Saver Card comment of the day. You take home a $50 Shell gift card from our friends at Shell through us. And remember also that, of course, just like this week, whenever Joey Logano, driver, that 22 Shell Pennzoil Ford Fusion, wins a race in 2014, Shell Saver Card holders save 22 cents per gallon on any grade of Shell nitrogen-rich gasoline or Shell diesel just by using their Shell Saver Card on the Wednesday after the race. For up to 25 gallons, visit shell.us/Wednesday for all the details.
Yeah, so if you want a shot at that $50 Shell gift card, put a comment up on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, our website, pitrow.com, or leave a comment under this Hangout at Google+, and we'll pick the best one every week and send you out a $50 gift card. I did put a couple of comments up today to kind of spur some conversation. One I talked about earlier where I asked, what brought the biggest cheer for me during the race Sunday, and I was pretty sure that it would be skewed heavily towards Jimmy Johnson crashing, and it was and is so far, although it's staying up there for a while. We did have somebody who was, I think, that was happy that Keselowski went out as well. But the other question I put up, and it was earlier this afternoon, and I'm getting some flack, and I knew I would get some flack. There was a video post put out by Michael Waltrip about his appearance on Dancing with the Stars yesterday, and it's where Waltrip does one of his serious stints, and he talks about how Dale Sr. was watching him from wherever Dale Sr. is watching, and he would have approved of this. And maybe that's true. Or maybe Michael's wired into him somehow, or if that's what he believes, I don't have a problem with it. What I'm totally tired of, and the reason I shared this thing over to our Facebook page and put the comment up with it that I did is Michael Waltrip has lost all credibility with me as far as NASCAR. I mean, to me, he's just a social media star now, and I'm getting flack for that. How do you guys feel about it? I mean, just to me, he's taken a legacy. He's a two-time Daytona 500 winner. Michael Waltrip is. After a long career of slogging it out and running with some not very good teams and putting in the time, and finally got it right and won some big races. And to me, what he's done the last 2 years, which is, I don't know. I'm not impressed. What do you guys? How do you feel, Beth? I know Beth's not a big fan either. I don't think so. Let her go.
No, I'm not really a big fan, and I kind of agree with that. It's just like, Dancing with the Stars. I mean, he should have more class, and I was actually down on him with all those cheesy commercials that he was doing, and the fact that he had to be in every picture of everything in NASCAR. It seemed whenever one of his team members, something happened to them, he had to be in the background. And
he was like the original photo bomber to me. But
yeah, I'm just kind of sick. I'm just kind of sick of him entirely right now.
Now, I don't know how much of the clip from last night that you put up, or how big how long it was. The deal was that
we lost Dan. I'm gonna have to reinvite Dan. So go ahead, keep going.
Basically, everybody. The premise of the show last night was the year that changed your life, and he said 2001. It was about a 2-minute long package that they did with all these people on the show. He started out by talking about how exciting winning the Daytona 500 was, how long he had worked to win the Daytona 500, how excited he was. They showed the footage from him in Victory Lane, the confetti, all that stuff that was going on.
Great. I was watching when it happened. It was fantastic.
Right. And then he said within a half an hour he went from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows to find out that his team boss, best friend, had been killed. And it was a well-done package. I thought it was a well-done package. He did end it somehow, and I don't remember the exact wording, and that might be what you have from YouTube, is something about that Dale was up there kind of watching and seeing what he was doing and whether or not he was approving of it or not. But he did, the dance that he did, the music that he did was from what he and Dale used to, there was a song, and I couldn't tell you what it was, my literacy for music, but the song they danced to last night was the song that he and Dale would play and sing to at the top of their voices when they were drunk on the back of Dale's boat. So that was kind of the deal. He still sucks as a dancer. And the fact that he still is on that show to come back next week over everybody else, probably 3 other people that should have not gotten voted off, is a testament strictly to the fact that NASCAR fans are voting for him on that show. So
yeah, and that's where this thing with me comes from. I was a Michael Waltrip fan, okay, when he as a race car driver, really was, and I think Steve, you know that. He's just blown it with me, and I can't be the only one. This persona he has now is just, I don't know.
well,
I'm tired of it. I guess he's worn it out for me.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. The only thing I do say is that at least when you look at Dancing with the Stars in NASCAR and Michael Waltrip, people are voting for him to stay on the damn show.
Sure, they
So,
are.
you know, myself as a NASCAR fan, I would vote for him to be off the show from exactly what you're saying. I think he's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But, you know, a vast majority of the people who are NASCAR fans obviously want to continue to see him on there.
Well, those are the people that are slamming me on our Facebook page today, and that's fine with that. I was kind of put it up there for that reason. So I knew there had to be a lot of people. There's a reason he's out there. I mean, it's not because all these advertisers think he's pretty or something. I don't get.
A quick step, that's for sure.
All right. Well, we're having issues with getting hooked up with Dan here. It looks like.
Am I not back?
Yeah, we got you back. We don't have video, but we've got your voice. So it's probably time to talk fantasy racing and talk about Charlotte. And there you are.
We have my face.
Do you have anything you want to add to the Michael Waltrip commentary before we go to fantasy racing talk?
I would say I kind of feel the same way about Darrell Waltrip that you do about Michael. I was a Darrell Waltrip fan until he went to Fox and started doing the goofy stuff that Fox has him do. So you can't. It does change your perception. I mean, I still feel really good about the stuff of what he did as a race car driver.
So do I.
But as a commentator, they both are just, I don't know.
They're shoved down your throat is what they are. They're shoved right down your throat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it's self-promotion.
So, I understand the people who are fans of both of them, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's one of the reasons NASCAR is as big as it is, popularity-wise, is we have these fans that like that stuff, and that's why they're out there on the show. That doesn't mean I gotta like them, and that doesn't mean you gotta like them. It doesn't mean anybody who was a fan of black and white TV has to like it, or Chris Economaki or any of these guys. But we're also, even though we are in that maybe a minority of the popularity, we're allowed to express our opinion about it too. And I'm tired of Michael Waltrip. Wish he'd take a year off.
Yeah. I can choose not to. I can choose not to watch Dancing with the Stars. I have a hard time choosing not to watch the pre-race coverage. So.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Or the ARCA coverage or the Truck Series. He's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's it. So anyway, we got a big race this weekend, and fantasy players this is important. This will be the 5th race into the chase. One of the last 6 races of the season. Teams are, if you're in contention for your league championship, all these things get important, and you're starting to run out of options. I would think at some of these games too, right?
You are, and you do have a couple of shots at dark horses. If you guessed right last week, there were a lot of dark horses in the top 10, but the fact that they were there last week bodes well for this week. The Kansas-Charlotte races were running back-to-back weekends in the spring. They've been running back-to-back weekends now for a couple of years, and the trend's pretty good that a driver that runs well at Kansas is going to run equally well at Charlotte. That's going to get skewed this week a little bit because of the field inversion, because of the crashes of Keselowski, Johnson, Earnhardt, even Gordon getting out of the draft and falling back. Those are guys that you're going to expect to be back up in the top 10. But the drivers that finished in the top 10 probably would have finished in the top 15. Your Austin Dillon, Paul Menard, Brian Vickers, Denny Hamlins. So you can expect them to, you can pick some dark horses out of that. And since most of those drivers in the Yahoo game are Yahoo Group B drivers, you got a good opportunity now to ignore Logano and Keselowski for a week, although both of them were capable of winning, both of them were capable of challenging for the win. But you've got a better shot at probably getting a dark horse that's going to finish somewhere in the 6th to 14th place range now, predictably, than you did in some of the other races. So the fact that these two races, Kansas and Charlotte, are in back-to-back weekends, I think is a pretty good, helps us out quite a bit. That said, they are different tracks. Kansas, you can split the similarly configured mile-and-a-half tracks and 2-mile tracks into two groups, the flat tracks and the steeply banked tracks. And Charlotte belongs more rightly with Atlanta and Texas than it does with Kansas, Kentucky, and Chicagoland. However, you've got some of that same approach to the corners. You can either choose to attack it or you can to seduce it. That gives the driver some options, and it means that the cream rises to the top. Drivers that are able to change the way they race tend to race well on both types of similarly configured mile-and-a-half tracks, steeply banked and minimally banked, because they can alter their approach. If you've got kind of a one-trick pony, someone who always likes to attack the corner, someone who always likes to ease into the corner, then they're a little bit less predictable, or they're predictable in a different way. You know that they're going to run well at Chicago, Kentucky, Kansas, but they're not going to run well at Charlotte, Texas, and Atlanta. Now, that said, you've got, I think this is the week, we said this at Dover, and we didn't get the answer that I thought we were going to get. If Jimmy Johnson didn't contend for a victory at Dover, something was seriously wrong with the team. He finished third. And the question remained, is there something still seriously wrong with the team? And we just don't know still. This is the week we're going to find out. If they don't contend for a win at Charlotte, being as far back in the points as they are, then yes, something's wrong, and they're not going to get it fixed. And if they don't get it fixed at Charlotte, they're going to go to Talladega and have to run well there. Nobody wants to do that. So if he's been holding anything back, this is the time for him to play his hand. Same for Keselowski. Not that Keselowski's been holding anything back. Keselowski and Logano are the two drivers who've been able to win at will. So if Keselowski can't challenge for the victory, if he can't potentially win, then the crash last week knocked some wind out of his sails. Kevin Harvick, I think he did the right thing last week. He felt he had a tire go down. He couldn't afford to be one of the 4 drivers who finished outside the top 35 if he'd smacked the wall. So his pitting was the right thing, but it put him in a little bit of a precarious position. Now he needs a solid run at Charlotte, and he needs a safe run at Talladega. And he's another one of those drivers usually doesn't have 2 bad runs in a row. Yeah, Gordon's in that same boat. So in Group A, I think your contest is going to come down to Johnson because he has to, Harvick and Gordon because they always have this season. They've been the most consistent Group A drivers, and they're going to be the ones that are going to challenge for the victory. Down in Group B, as I said, I think you can kind of ignore Keselowski and Logano this week because we've got some other dark horses that are going to pop up there. I've got Carl Edwards and Denny Hamlin both ranked relatively highly, and a little bit that's hedging my bets. I think one of the two might have problems, but they're going to be an unpredictable problem, like another tire issue or a problem in the pit. But after they finished in the top 10 last week at Kansas, you got to make them one of the favorites to finish among the top 10 at Charlotte. And the same's true for then some of the dark horses. You can really only take one dark horse and put them on your roster because you need to have some safe bets in case someone really looks bad in practice. So your one dark horse this week is going to come down to Paul Menard, Brian Vickers. Maybe you would call Ryan Newman a dark horse to finish in the top 10 because he's finished in that 16th place range or that top 15 range more often. And those are the drivers that you're going to really choose from you might want to keep Keselowski or Logano, one or the other, on your roster this week in order to get potential bonus points for qualification. And if that's the case, it's probably Logano that you want to hang on to rather than Keselowski. But whenever you do that, if you keep both of them, you've got to be aware that you're either locking yourself into your other two drivers, or you're going to take those last one or two allocations that you've been saving all year and potentially use it up. That happened to me last week. Fortunately, I chose Logano over Keselowski for one of those last allocations and got the victory out of him. So, sometimes it works out for you and sometimes it doesn't. If I flipped the coin and it come up a little bit different, I would have lost a lot of points with Keselowski. Down in Group C this week, Larson's going to be the top finisher. Dillon's going to be somewhere around that 10 to 15th place range. I think he's going to double down, get at least back-to-back top 15s. So if you have 5 allocations remaining for those drivers, you're not going to use it, and there's no incentive to take anybody else. If you don't, Trevor Bayne's in the car this week, and he's a acceptable option. He's finished badly in his last 3 races for the Wood Brothers. I think he's suffered crash damage at whatever the last 3 races were, Daytona, Michigan, and whichever the other one was. But when he doesn't crash, he's going to finish somewhere in that mid to high teens range. And that's close enough to Larson that it makes him a good allocation management play if you can't run the season out with those other drivers. Short of him, Danica Patrick probably should have finished a little bit better than she did last week. She has a tendency to improve as the race goes along, but she never really got that chance because she kind of hovered in that second position 1 lap down, so she didn't get the benefit of NASCAR's no driver left behind policy. Had she managed to get back on the lead lap a little bit earlier, she probably would have been contended for a low teens or maybe even a top 10 with the attrition. And so it's a little bit of a coin flip with her too. You got to 500 miles is a longer race than 400 miles. It is obvious, and that gives her a little bit more time to try to get her car right and come to the front. So she's probably a little bit better, little better gamble this week than she was last week at Kansas.
All right, well, that winds us up and brings us to, how did we do last week? How did we do in our picks last week?
We sucked, except for you.
Yeah, no, that's why I brought it up.
It's Steve and Beth had McMurray, and I had Kane, so all of us had good running drivers. Only one of us had a good finish driver.
I think I had Larson, didn't I? Did I have Larson?
Larson.
Yeah, I thought so. All right, well, that brings us to when we got to pick again this week. And, man, I'm tempted to take Larson this week. But I'm going to go, since I was a top finisher last week, I'm going out on a limb again. I like Larson's teammate, Jamie McMurray, this week at Charlotte.
You don't
what do
get
you think,
to pick,
Steve? What's that?
You don't get to pick. You picked last week. You said I'm picking Larson, and I'm going ahead and taking Kane for Charlotte.
Oh, that's right. I did, didn't I? Okay, I'm good with that. I forgot. Yeah, I'm good with that. I'll take Casey Kane this week. You have to keep those notes, don't you?
That's what I'm clicking here in the background.
You can't get away with anything on this show. All right, Steve. Since I've got Casey Kane, who you got?
I'm taking Kevin Harvick for the win.
Kevin Harvick. Beth Ann, who you got?
I'm going with Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, I knew you were going to do that, and I think that's a good pick. What about you, Dan? Who do you think?
Kez. Got to win, and he will.
Yeah, I think Keselowski and Johnson are probably got to be the favorites, co-favorites going into this thing. It'll be interesting to watch. It's a 500-miler. It's under the lights at Charlotte. It's always a fun race pretty race to watch, I think. And hopefully the weather will hang in there for those folks down in North Carolina, and we won't have any delays or anything. So we'll be back and talk about this again next week. Again, and sorry, folks, for a bit of a delay. Make sure you follow Dan on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read his fantasy racing articles at rotoworld.com and yahoosports.com. He's got just the best stuff out there if you're a fantasy racer, as you know, probably. And then tune in on Thursday when Dan and I do kind of a late week fantasy show about this race at Charlotte this week. Steve, follow Steve on Twitter at Bench Racing, Beth Ann at My Metro Toledo, me at On Pit Row. We'll see you all again next week for our live NASCAR Hangout on Pit Row. And I apologize, we were not trying to diss him. We're not pulling a car dealer thing. This Dustin Long actually was supposed to join us, but Dustin had a last-minute opportunity to do something that paid him, and we don't. So maybe we'll get hooked up with Dustin again next week and talk about his new children's book that's out. So and NASCAR, of course. So again, I'm Charlie Turner. See you next week. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the races, and don't diss on me too much for being Michael Waltrip slammer. Just the way it is. See you later.